Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Age Better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman, and joining me today is a delightful person. I'm so happy to have her on the show, Natalie Kormos, who is a young poet. She's been writing poetry for many years, and she's written a wonderful book, Fibres of a Memory, and she wrote this book with a patient who has Alzheimer's. So this is a really special book written by a very special young woman. So welcome, Natalie.
Hello, Barbara. Thank you very much for having me.
So what inspired you to write this particular book? And we know that you've been writing poetry for a long time, but why this book?
Well, I wrote this book actually when I was doing my master's dissertation. I put that together. And first and foremost, to help people. Coming from my background and experience with singing and music, there's a very pertinent versatility to the rhyming nature of my book, as there's fascinating research with music and Alzheimer's, and particularly in the area of Alzheimer's therapy. Now, a lot of my writing comes from a scientific perspective, and this has been greatly influenced by Professor Vincent Yannick, a former director of the Scottish Oceans Institute at the University of St. Andrews. And he has always very poignantly spurred on and encouraged my great passion for scientific learning, and always encouraged me to ask questions when I'm delving into new information. And so the scientific base specifically for this book comes from the research and teaching of Professor Frank Gunmore, also at the University of St. Andrews. And Professor Gunmore has conducted a great amount of fascinating and successful research in the area of Alzheimer's. And he describes two of the hallmarks in postmortem brains of Alzheimer's patients, being the amyloid beta plaques and neurofibrillary tau tangles. Now, while one or the other of these occurrences can be found in numerous different animals, very few present both. Now, one of these animals are dolphins. And so he has discovered in dissections of brains of dolphins that have been deceased in strandings, both the plaques and the tangles. So while it's not yet known for certain whether dolphins are experiencing dementia symptoms in a similar manner as humans, it's a potential explanation for mass pod strandings, where an affected individual is perhaps becoming confused and ends up in shallow water. Another consideration is that Alzheimer's disease is occurring in animals with a long post-fertility lifespan, so humans and dolphins. So it was in Professor Gunmore's neurobiology lectures, and we were deep into taking notes, and he was describing neural connections and the synapse. And it was at that moment that he had said, and that is a memory. And that overwhelmingly stuck with me and was such a great inspiration for this book, most notably in the title, Fibres of a Memory. Fibers relating to the dendritic structures of neurons.
Natalie, thank you for sharing that with us. That sounds like two incredible professors at the University of St. Andrews. And wow, they really did teach you a lot. And certainly they taught you probably one of the most important life lessons you'll ever get, to ask the important questions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you did combine your lyrical poetry with the artwork of a patient who is experiencing Alzheimer's. So how did you connect with that particular person? And tell us a little bit about her, Susan Parrish.
Yes, wonderful Susan. So I reached out to all the branches of the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, seeing if there was interest in a collaboration with artwork. And so I was contacted by Lorraine McCallum in Peterborough, and she connected me with Brian Parrish. And so Brian's wonderful wife, Susan, who lived with Alzheimer's, she created hundreds of beautiful pieces of artwork as part of her art therapy. And the more I learned about Susan, the more I wanted to meet her, which was a really difficult part of the collaboration, as Susan sadly passed away in 2018. And so she was such a trailblazing beacon for her own community and so many others. in creating Alzheimer's friendly communities. So she worked to create awareness of which individuals were living with Alzheimer's and how others with patience and understanding how they could help with day-to-day life. And so she didn't allow Alzheimer's to identify herself as someone handicapped by or suffering from Alzheimer's. So it really is wonderful, and I keep that in whenever I'm talking about her story or with others that they're living with Alzheimer's. And so there's a lot of intentional features about my book. But something interesting is that the cover image, I picked it and I was really drawn to it out of all the images that Brian sent to me. And he later told me that that is one of his family's favorite pieces of artwork. And they have it framed in large scale in their home. So that's really just very lovely.
I'm holding it up again for everyone to see. It is absolutely beautiful. I mean, speaking of dolphins, your dolphin story, of course, the colors reminds me of the ocean.
Yes. Yeah, and
It's beautiful.
I really love that too about what sitting with someone and they look through the book and seeing what they can see in the images. But intentional features about my book, there's currently only a physical format. And that was very important to me as I wanted something tangible that was easy for people just to sit down and open up to share. And my book has a classification of large print, so it's easy for all ages to read. And
Hmm.
the artwork was such a focal point of the project. And so I made sure that when it was printed, it had enhanced coloring for the images. And now there's one image that it is purposely repeated twice in the book. And so it almost appears as a misty spattering. And it's as
Hmm.
if memories, they're coming into emergence. And it also reminds me of neurons, but it was intentionally repeated to mimic the nature and patterns of our memories and the strengthening of neural connections.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out. And how did you actually write your poetry? Did you look at and reflect on and contemplate the artwork and then wrote your poetry? What was your artistic process here?
Well, I didn't have the images until many years later. I wrote this poem maybe about 8 years ago. Sometimes you have a piece of writing and then come back to it. Brian sent me all these images. And so just looking through them, really just what felt like it connected to
Yes,
specific parts of my writing.
really such a beautiful combination of lyrical words with art, beautiful, beautiful art created by what sounds like she sounded like a lovely, lovely woman.
Yes.
Um, how do you hope this book and your words and this artwork together will help to end Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia? What do you hope to achieve with this book?
So the thing about my book is that it's really a book for everyone. It's not a children's book. It's not just for adults. Fibres of a Memory is a book for everyone. And that's a difficult part too of really sharing it because it's not fitting into sort of a predetermined category. So that's been a challenge of getting it out there so that people know it's available so that it can help. And the feedback I've received, it's really been wonderful. People have said that it's a comfort, that it's consoling. And that is exactly what I hope for it to be. I hope that a grandchild, can sit down with it and share it with a grandparent. And that people find comfort and solace, but not only people living with Alzheimer's, but for the many others affected, so caregivers and loved ones. And I hope it opens up conversations where maybe someone was isolated physically or emotionally, and they can look at this book and share challenges, emotions, and understanding of the neurobiology of Alzheimer's as well.
Hmm. And it also, I think, could encourage people to take on projects like this, maybe within families, having
Yes.
young people in the families write some words, either poetry or essays or just whatever they're thinking. And maybe someone who is experiencing some degree of Alzheimer's or other form of dementia could create some artistic works to go with it. I mean, I think this project was just so wonderful, and I hope that more people get together and collaborate in this way to create some other books and projects like this. Just beautiful. And I'm just flipping through right now and look at some of this. Quite a few of the images to me really represent nature. I see a lot of nature in Susan's artwork. Thank you so much for sharing this and for sharing your story, Natalie.
I have so many more projects that are similar to this one that I look forward to publishing and sharing so that they can help others.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you so much. And there will be links, as I said, in the show notes for everyone to check out the book and hopefully buy a copy so that we can really, really, really push the conversation around dementia and Alzheimer's specifically. Thank you, Natalie, for joining me.